Two topics this morning, one having to do with certain transportation industry, known by everybody as Uber and Lyft. And then we have a second piece that's totally unrelated, having to do with an amazing little art project that's kind of gotten off the ground here in Lincoln thanks to certain individuals. So let's talk about Uber and Lyft to start with. I want to welcome City Council Member Lirian Gaylord-Baird. And also, you may recognize this other dude here, former council person, Trent Fellers.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Both of these folks had a lot to do with regard to the new ordinance and the whole discussion with regard to the new kind of ride-sharing services that we've come to know and understand and appreciate. The ordinance relating to all this will be introduced at the City Council meeting on Monday, and it would exempt those services from the city's taxi cab ordinance, and in the process resolve questions having to do with the legality of services at the local level. City officials have closely monitored the growing industry over the last couple of years, and have had no reports of problems. Ride sharing is proving to be a safe, inexpensive, and convenient option for users and a good income source for drivers. Here's some of the background. In 2015, the state legislature passed a bill providing for the legal operation of ride-sharing services. They are officially called Transportation Network Companies, or TNCs. These services are required to obtain a permit from the Nebraska Public Service Commission, but individual drivers do not have to receive PSC permission if they work for a permitted TNC. A TNC must have a zero tolerance policy with respect to drugs and alcohol use by drivers when providing service. The bill also gives the PSC, the Public Service Commission, authority to conduct audits of TNC records. So, when all of this came down, our city attorney's office had determined that TNC drivers are considered taxi cab drivers under the city code, the local code, which would make them subject to additional regulatory requirements. Those include submitting to a written exam and having a medical exam upon hire and every 3 years thereafter, and things similar to that. Instead of treating people who provide and use ride sharing as lawbreakers, we decided to step back, make sure our residents are protected, but then take action to put this set of services where we think it should be. We can't ignore the important role that ride sharing plays in the economy. I'm excited that we can move forward and amend the ordinance and give these services an official green light. And I want to thank again Trent and Lirian for being advocates of these changes to make ride sharing available and legal for the public. And I want to invite them to say a few words if they're so inclined. Lirian?
Thank you, Mayor Reitler. Good morning, everybody. I just want to add my support for this modernization of our city laws. Consumer demand for ride-hailing services is demonstrating why we can exempt transportation network companies from these additional regulations. Ride-hailing companies have to build customer loyalty and positive feedback into their business model in order to exist. So they've really just created a market-based form of regulation for themselves. We want to make ride-hailing services more accessible for more people in Lincoln because there are many ways that we all benefit from them. First, ride-hailing companies like Uber and Lyft are creating flexible job opportunities for people who want and need them. These transportation alternatives can help reduce traffic congestion on our streets and free up parking spaces downtown. And one of the most important benefits, of course, is that these services enhance public safety by fulfilling the role of designated driver when people are out drinking. But the bottom line is there's a growing demand for this, and our city laws need to keep up with the reality on the streets and the evolution of transportation. Thank you.
Well, this is a little weird to be back doing this. I appreciate the Mayor's Office, the Police Department, the City Law, Lyrian's work on this. We had many discussions about this when I was on the council, and it was really cool to see a business-friendly piece of legislation like this that not only helps Uber and Lyft be able to operate, but the drivers not have to be subjected to something that really isn't needed at this point. There's a lot of transparency in the transaction between an Uber and Lyft driver and the consumer, and through the app you're able to see that. And if you haven't taken an Uber or Lyft drive, I encourage you to do that, because it's a really easy way to get around in the evenings and maybe go from place to place. Like Larry mentioned, the designated driver, for a designated driver, it's an amazing thing. You don't have to really think about it. You can just pull out your app and get yourself home. I used to work for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. God, if we would have had this 20 years ago, we could have reduced the number of fatalities that are out there. So I think this is a wonderful thing for Lincoln, for a college town like us, for a town that's growing its business community and having more people come into the city. This is almost essential to have ride-sharing options. So I appreciate the work on this, and thanks for having me back.
Thanks for being here, Trent. I think with that, we'll take questions on this part of the press conference. Chief Bleimeister is here, our police chief, of course. Jeff Kilpatrick is here from our law department. So we have a couple of people that were highly involved in sorting through the issue. So questions?
Chief Bleimeister, why do you think it's such a good idea? How does it help the city?
Jane, just a couple things. One, as you know, that we're a very data-driven organization, and we have begun measuring alcohol-related crashes and DUIs both locally and state since the inception of TNCs in Nebraska. And although the data is too soon to show, and I wouldn't want to stand up here and say unequivocally that we are seeing a decline, we are seeing declines in the number of DUI arrests, both locally and in the state. The other thing is anecdotally, and these are powerful messages from our downtown officers. After bar break, they are seeing streams of transportation network company drivers coming in and picking people up. And we really believe that's enhancing the overall safety for them as individuals, but and also just the entire downtown organization. And another one that we're seeing all the time is on game days. Game days in areas where historically there's been large gatherings of people and parties prior to the beginning of the games. People are using transportation network companies to come in and provide safe transportation, whether it's to go watch the game somewhere else or to Memorial Stadium to be part of that particular venue. So.
You said a reduction in DUIs. Is that since you've seen Ubers and those type of companies on the scene?
Correct, and those are in arrests. And so I'm very cautious. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's exclusively because of the implementation of TNCs, but common sense would dictate that that has to be a factor. So, good questions.
If this is good for Lyft and Uber, why isn't it good for taxi driving companies? Why do we have a separate set of regulations?
Well, the regulations that we've had for taxi cab drivers have been long-standing. We've had a number of conversations with representatives of cab companies about whether they want us to revisit the city code that applies to them. Thus far, they've indicated that they're not asking for any changes. That could change, and I think, at least from the administration standpoint, they've indicated, the mayor's indicated he'd be happy to talk to them about what sort of changes they might propose, if any.
Mayor, do you know, are there any numbers if the taxi cabs have declined after Uber and Lyft got into the city? Are we seeing fewer? less taxi cab service because of Uber and Lyft?
The Public Service Commission does keep track of taxi cab rides, and it's, I guess, a mixed bag, because what they report in Omaha is since Uber and Lyft have come into the market, the number of cab rides has actually gone up in Omaha. What we've seen is reverse in Lincoln. Since Uber and Lyft entered the market, there has been a decline in cab rides. But that's only been a couple of years, so it might just be a blip.
Do you know if there's been a decline in licensed cabs? Maybe a decline in the availability of taxi service?
I don't know. I know that, we had a fairly recent expansion of cab companies serving Lincoln, so there was an increase because of that, but I couldn't tell you what the numbers are in 2017 as opposed to 2016.
And are there state regulations for taxi cabs that the city can't go below? Is this also a state issue?
There is some state regulation of cab companies, and they do a fair amount of the enforcement for cab. If you're running an illegal cab operation, it's the Public Service Commission that carries the brunt of that enforcement effort.
So complaints about if certain drivers did something that was inappropriate or somebody considered illegal, have you had those, and who does that go through? Public Service, police? What happened for that?
Jane, another good question. And if there is a complaint that is made against a driver of a TNC, then we are obviously going to investigate that, especially if it's criminal in nature. And I can tell you today that we have sent members of our staff to training specifically provided by TNC companies that range the gamut from what we would do to gain information if we need that as part of a complex criminal investigation, and also how they vet their particular employees and how they hold them accountable. They've been very open and transparent with us, and in that training was well received. As far as individual incidents as it relates to TNCs, I am not aware of any that have occurred, but if there are, we're going to investigate those. And as Jeff mentioned, all of this is very subject to continual analysis. It's very new. 2015 through today is a small data set that we have to work with.
But the main difference is that if I have a complaint against a TNC driver, I go to the police. If I have a cab company complaint, I go to the Public Service Commission.
Charlie, if you have a criminal complaint in nature of some type of criminal offense, you come to the Lincoln Police Department within the confines of the city of Lincoln. If it's some type of administrative or regulatory complaint, that is where the PSC comes in. Now, we work closely with one another. We share information back and forth, because oftentimes those kinds of things can overlap.
But that's true for both TNCs and cabs?
That is correct. And I know as part of this particular process, the City Attorney's Office did a complex review of what regulations the PSC have for both taxis and for TNCs. And there are some differences there, but again, they are the regulatory body and will continue to be.
We haven't enforced the city ordinance since we have this influx of Uber and Lyft drivers.
That's true. There hasn't been a citation issued against a Lyft driver for not having a cab license.
Jeff, is there anything in the law that taxi cab drivers can do that Uber and Lyft drivers can't do at this point? Or
Well,
are they essentially identical in the services they can offer?
one of the things that was carved out in state law is that when you're transporting certain people for, like, the state of Nebraska, some cab companies can do that. That's separate. That's not something that the TNC companies do. It's really not part of their business plan to do transportation for handicapped individuals or low-income individuals with vouchers. That's just not part of their business plan, at least not right now. That would be the main difference that I can think of.
Okay, everybody good? Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you. Trent, good to see you again.
You too.
All right, let's move on to another topic that's just as much fun. An art project. And I wanted to invite, kind of strange, but I want to invite our friend Charlie Brogan to come forward here. Let me say a few things, and then he can get into more detail about how all this is happening. And, you know, Charlie usually wears his reporter's hat to these conferences, but today he's representing both Alpha Media and the Hildegard Center of the Arts, or for the Arts. These are two of the local organizations that have come together over the last couple of weeks to support what appears to be a very popular cause, but it's certainly a good cause. This morning we're kicking off what's called Art Breaks. It's a community-wide effort to provide art supplies to children affected by Hurricane Harvey in Texas. In addition to Alpha Media and Hildegard, the project organizers include the Lincoln Public Schools, the UNL Center for Civic Engagement, the Lincoln Arts Council, and some very dedicated volunteers, I hear also. Starting next week, you'll find drop-off barrels at several local locations across the city. If you attend the Lincoln Arts Festival at South Point, for example, the weekend of September 30th and October 1st, you'll find a drop-off point there for donations. You'll also see a Star Tram bus with the KFOR and Alpha Media graphics on it at Pioneer Woods Shopping Center at 70th and Pioneers in front of Hobbytown, USA. It will also be a spot for the public to donate art supplies. Lorenda Rice with LPS has made connections with schools near Belmont, Texas, and they're ready for this to receive this huge gift of art supplies from Nebraska. Why art supplies? We understand that the hurricane destroyed a great many possessions, including, of course, the art supplies that the kids had at their homes and at the schools. We also know that the arts and creativity can provide a healing process when kids are going through very traumatic times in their lives. So I understand that this was all actually Charlie's idea. Thank you very much, Charlie, for providing our community with a way to help kids in Texas. Tell us more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the mayor for the help in launching this project. And secondly, I want to thank Trent for the phrase, because it is really weird to be up here and doing this. Hildegard Center for the Arts is a Lincoln-based 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been in existence for nearly 10 years now. And each project undertaken by Hildegard has something to do with art. It collaborates with at least one other group, and it addresses some social need. And when the hurricane was approaching Texas and it became obvious that there was going to be widespread destruction, our chair issued a email to all of us on the board of directors saying, what can we do to help these people? And so the idea arose that there was going to be a lot of attention paid by the emergency management folks to food, shelter, clothing, rescue, and all types of infrastructure issues, and that the sort of above-the-line issues, such as cultural activities, might take a back seat for a while. So we thought that it would be a good idea to invite the people of Lincoln to donate art supplies, which would then be taken to Houston in one big shipment. And we have found a partner in Houston, Lamar University, and they're actually in Beaumont, Texas, which is southeast of Houston, an area that was also very hard hit. And they're going to distribute art supplies to schools, community service organizations, after-school programs, and the type of endeavors that will help children to use it and continue the creative activities that art supplies would allow them to do. So we have a website, hildegardcenter.org, and it will have information in detail, including a list of the supplies that have been requested by the art teachers in Texas. We have several locations right now, both locations of Hobbytown, Pioneer Woods and 33rd and Cornhusker, Gomez Art Supply downtown near 14th and O, Michael's Arts and Crafts Supplies, both 400 North 48th and South Point, Urban Legends Art Studio in University Place. We'll have one donation site at the Lincoln Arts Festival, which is going to be September 30th and October 1st at South Point. And that same weekend, our Star Trend bus that is wrapped with our KFOR logo will be at the Pioneer Woods Shopping Center. We've also invited a number of other art galleries and art supply retailers to participate with this. And so we'll be adding locations as we go along. So we want to thank everybody in advance for their donations and encourage them to participate.
Okay, Jane, I assume you will have one super tough question for it. You've given some practice in this stuff.
Oh, she'll nail me if she can.
Nancy missed part of it, so maybe she has some catch-up questions.
Nancy will donate her glasses.
Everybody good? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you for the help in launching this.
I hope it goes well.
I think it will.
Judy and I will try to remember.